you are probably going to touch it today. I mean, maybe you'll brush past it in a really hushed, heavily air-conditioned bank lobby.
Yeah, or you'll see it in a luxury hotel bathroom.
Right, or maybe you are literally slicing a lemon on it right now on your kitchen counter. It is like the ultimate symbol of peace, luxury, and just absolute stillness.
Oh, totally. But the truth is, that smooth, perfectly cold piece of white marble was born from just unimaginable geological violence.
Yeah, and bringing it out of the mountain and into your house required an equally violent human cost, honestly. So today, we are tearing the shiny veneer off of human civilization's favorite rock.
It is the great paradox of architecture and art, you know?
Yep.
The very material we've used for millennia to represent eternity and perfect calm is actually a ledger of destruction.
It really is.
It's a story of continents colliding, mountains being hollowed out by hand, and this profound human obsession with trying to, outlast time itself.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We have an incredible journey ahead of us, unpacking this massive stack of research, historical data, geological surveys, and supply chain reports. And it's all centered on this single material based on a comprehensive document we have here called marble.pdf.
Right, and the overarching framework we're using today traces the journey of marble through a very specific and honestly brilliant sequence.
Yeah, we are tracking it from stone to formation to extraction to trade to labor to art and finally to meaning.
And this specific framing is deeply rooted in empathy,
Yeah.
actually. The framework we are exploring was inspired by a specific analytical lens within the research notes that they refer to as a Kelly subpersonality.
Which is such a cool way to look at it.
It really is. It focuses on environmental care and the human element. It forces a vital shift in how we look at building materials.
Right, because instead of just asking what the stone is or how much it costs, it forces us to ask what it physically takes from the earth and, what it costs the people who actually have to pull it out of the dirt. So that is our mission today. We're going to unpack how a battered, cooked, and pressurized rock became civilization's ultimate language of permanence, beauty, and power.
And to uncover the hidden human and environmental costs buried right beneath its polished surface.
Yeah.
Because this deep dive isn't just about geology or architecture. It is really about the human desire to outlast time.
100%. But before this stone can be carved into a statue of an emperor or laid on a billionaire's floor, the earth has to actually make it.
Yeah, and this doesn't just happen overnight.
No, not at all. We have to rewind into deep geological time because marble does not start out as a hard, beautiful stone. It starts out as something incredibly ordinary and kind of gross.
Well, it starts as a graveyard, essentially.
Oh, a graveyard?
Yeah, I mean, marble is a metamorphic rock.
Hmm.
That classification, metamorphic, means it has completely changed its form. Its original state, its parent rock, is usually limestone or dolostone.
Okay.
And limestone is just accumulated marine sediment. So if you go back tens or hundreds of millions of years, imagine a shallow, warm, ancient sea. Trillions upon trillions of microscopic marine organisms, coral, mollusks, and plankton, live, die, and fall to the seafloor.
Okay, let's unpack this. So when I am leaning against a pristine marble pillar, I am essentially leaning against a compressed tower of microscopic sea bug skeletons.
Billions of them.
Yeah.
Their shells and skeletons are incredibly rich in calcium carbonate.
Yeah.
And over millions of years, this organic debris just piles up on the ocean floor, layer upon layer, hundreds of feet thick.
Kind of piling up.
Yeah, and the sheer weight of the ocean above, combined with the weight of the accumulating sediment, compresses all that organic material. It slowly lithifies, which is just the geological term for turning into stone, becoming limestone.
Oh, wow.
If you pick up a piece of standard unprocessed limestone today, you can actually read that history. You can see the distinct sedimentary layers. You can even spot the tiny intact fossils of those ancient marine creatures.
It's like a very literal record of ancient life. But limestone is soft, right? Like it's porous and it crumbles. It is definitely not the indestructible polished stone we use for monuments.
No, definitely not.
So how do we get from a crumbly graveyard of seashells to, a pristine slab of Carrara marble?
The Earth has to put it through an absolute crucible. This is where tectonic forces take over. The Earth's crust is not static. Plates shift, continents collide, and ocean floors are subducted or folded upward to create mountain ranges.
Right, plate tectonics.
Exactly. And during these massive tectonic events, those deep, flat layers of limestone get dragged down deep into the Earth's crust or folded violently under rising mountains.
They get buried alive, basically.
They do. And when they are buried that deeply, two extraordinary forces act upon them. You have unimaginable pressure from the weight of the Earth and mountains above, and intense geothermal heat from the Earth's mantle below.
How hot are we talking here?
We are talking about temperatures ranging from 300 degrees Celsius to over 800 degrees Celsius.
Wait, if you heat a rock to 800 degrees Celsius, why doesn't it just melt entirely into lava? I mean, it sounds like you were just describing a volcano.
That is the incredibly delicate balance of metamorphism, actually. If the temperature gets just a little too high or if there is too much liquid present, the limestone will indeed melt completely, turning into magma.
Oh, okay.
And when that magma eventually cools, it forms an igneous rock, like granite. But if the temperature is too low, the rock just remains slightly baked limestone.
So it needs like a sweet spot.
Exactly. Metamorphism requires a very specific Goldilocks zone of extreme heat and crushing directional pressure, where the rock is essentially plastic. It is soft enough to fundamentally change its molecular structure, but it never fully turns into a liquid.
That is so wild. I am trying to picture what is happening at the microscopic level while it's baking in this geological oven. The original limestone is full of distinct layers and little fossilized shells, right? So what happens to all of that?
It is entirely eradicated. The intense heat and pressure cause the calcium carbonate molecules, the literal building blocks of the stone, to break their bonds and completely recrystallize.
So the fossils are just gone.
Every trace of the fossils, every single sedimentary layer is wiped out. The molecules reorganize themselves into a tightly interlocking crystalline lattice. Geologists call this a granoblastic texture.
Granoblastic texture. Okay, let me see if I can translate this to a kitchen analogy. Because the idea of a rock melting but not melting is hard to wrap your head around.
So far.
It feels a bit like taking a loose, crumbly cube of sugar, which is full of air pockets and distinct grains, right? And you put a blowtorch to it, you heat it until it melts down, the distinct grains vanish, and it hardens into a solid, smooth sheet of hard caramel.
That's a really great visualization.
Thanks. Because the fundamental chemical ingredients, the sugar, are exactly the same. But the physical structure has been radically, violently altered into something much denser.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize the structural shift. In the limestone, you have grains of calcium carbonate held together with empty space and weaker bonds. In the newly formed marble, you have interlocking calcite crystals that have literally grown into one another.
Right.
They fit together like a perfect three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle with absolutely zero empty space between them.
And that lack of empty space has to be the reason marble takes such a crazy polish, right? I have always wondered about that. You can't polish a piece of sandstone to look like a mirror. So why does marble shine like glass when you buff it?
It all comes down to that granoblastic texture you just hit on. When you look at a porous stone like sandstone, or even unpolished limestone under a microscope, the surface is rugged. It is full of microscopic craters and jagged edges.
So the light just scatters everywhere.
Exactly. When light hits that rugged surface, the photons scatter in a million different directions. Your eye perceives that scattered light as a matte, dull finish. But with marble, because those newly baked calcite crystals are locked together so incredibly tightly, a human being with an abrasive tool can grind the surface down to an absolutely flat, uniform plane. There are no microscopic craters to catch the light. So when a beam of light hits polished marble, it doesn't scatter. It bounces straight back at your eye in a perfect, uniform wave. That is what a mirror polish actually is, a surface so structurally dense it can reflect light perfectly.
Which brings up a massive misconception I really want to push back on. We have this pervasive cultural obsession with the purity of white marble. People talk about it like it's this divine, untouched, innocent material.
Oh, absolutely.
But based on everything you just said about how it's formed from crushed sea bugs and then looking at the beautiful, dramatic veins of color we see in luxury stone, isn't calling it pure fundamentally wrong? I mean, isn't it actually a rock born from destruction?
What's fascinating here is that, scientifically speaking, the concept of pure marble is entirely culturally constructed. A geologically pure marble, meaning a rock that is 100% calcium carbonate with absolutely no other elements introduced during the metamorphic process, is indeed stark, blindingly white.
Right, but that's rare, isn't it?
It is. The reality is that the famous sweeping veins, the dramatic swirls, and the deep colors that consumers prize so highly, those are literally chemical contaminations.
The flaws are the feature. You are literally paying a premium for the impurities.
Precisely. Remember, this stone is being cooked and crushed during violent tectonic collisions. When continents crash together, things get messy. Other minerals and elements from the surrounding earth get folded, squished, and baked into the limestone as it recrystallizes.
So that's where the colors come from.
Yes. If there are iron oxides present in the surrounding soil, the resulting marble will have brilliant red, yellow, or brown veins running through it. If organic carbon or graphite gets trapped in the lattice, you get sweeping gray or black patterns.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Serpentine minerals create those stunning, rich green marbles. Clay minerals give you soft creams and warm beiges. Even tiny bits of pyrite can get trapped, creating microscopic gold flecks.
So when a homeowner drops $50,000 on a heavily veined, dramatic slab of Calicut marble for their kitchen, they are essentially paying a luxury premium for millions of years of ancient dirt, rust, and carbon that interrupted a white rock.
Beautifully baked dirt and rust, yeah. And the timeline required to bake that dirt into the stone is staggering. We are talking about a process that defies human comprehension.
Because it takes so long.
The initial accumulation of marine sediment alone takes millions of years, then millions more for the pressure to turn it into limestone, then tens to hundreds of millions of years of tectonic metamorphism. Many of the major global deposits that we mine today are over 100 million years old.
Wow.
Some of the sources indicate that certain marble deposits originate from limestones laid down in the Paleozoic era.
The Paleozoic era, that is over 300 million years ago. That is before dinosaurs even existed. The Earth was a completely different planet. The continents weren't even in the same places.
And this creates a profound, almost poetic tension, if you think about it. It takes hundreds of millions of years of chaotic, violent pressure, the literal crashing together of tectonic plates, to create a stone that human beings instinctively look at and associate with total calm, silence, and eternity.
Yeah, that contrast is wild.
We look at a mountain of marble and think it represents peace,
Yeah.
but we are actually looking at fossilized violence. It is the Earth's pressure turned visible.
Okay, so the Earth spends 300 million years locking this stuff away in a tectonic vault miles underground. It seems like the planet is actively trying to keep it hidden, honestly.
Nature definitely didn't make it easy to get to.
Exactly. How on earth did early humans look at a solid, imposing mountain and decide, yeah, I am going to take a 50-ton piece of that home? This is where the story shifts from geological time to human time. And honestly, it takes a very dark turn.
It really does.
Because the moment humanity decides to interrupt that geological silence, we introduce an entirely new kind of violence to the stone.
It is the brutal threshold between geology and culture. Knowing this beautiful stone exists is one thing. Actually extracting a massive solid block of it out of the face of a mountain without shattering it is a completely different reality.
Because we have to remember the fundamental nature of this material. Marble is what the industry calls a dimension stone. It is not like gold or iron or copper.
Right, you can't melt it down.
Exactly. You can't just mine a bunch of loose, dirty marble pebbles, toss them into a blazing furnace, melt them down to a liquid, skim off the impurities, and pour it into a nice, neat mold. You are entirely at the mercy of the stone's physical integrity in the mountain. It has to be cut out whole, moved whole, and carved whole.
Which means gravity becomes your ultimate unyielding enemy.
Yeah.
The sheer density of the interlocking crystal structure we talked about makes it incredibly heavy. A modest block of marble can weigh upwards of 20, 30, or 50 tons.
Which is just incomprehensible weight.
And historically, ancient societies did not have combustion engines, hydraulics, or heavy cranes. They had human hands, basic iron tools, and physics.
The historical extraction methods detailed in the research are terrifyingly rudimentary. Imagine standing on a blindingly white, sun-baked mountainside in ancient Greece or Rome. The quarry workers would use hand-forged iron or bronze chisels and heavy hammers to manually cut deep, narrow grooves into the solid rock face, outlining the massive block they wanted to extract.
Which is backbreaking labor on its own.
Totally. But a chisel can only go so deep. To actually snap the block away from the mountain, they used an ingenious but agonizingly slow application of natural forces. They would take completely dry, dense wooden wedges and hammer them tightly into those deep grooves. Then they would soak the wooden wedges with water.
It is a remarkable manipulation of the physical properties of wood. When the dry wood fiber absorbs the water, it swells. The cellular structure expands.
And that's enough to break rock.
Yes. The slow, silent, immense outward pressure generated by that swelling wood is actually powerful enough to crack solid rock along a fault line, popping the 50-ton block free from the mountain. It is an incredibly clever use of natural expansion, but it was profoundly dangerous.
I can imagine.
You are relying on invisible pressures inside the stone, hoping it fractures exactly where you want it to, and not directly onto the workers standing beneath it.
And once it pops free, your problems are just beginning. You now have a rock the size of a city bus sitting on the side of a mountain. I really want to highlight a specific historical transport method mentioned in the notes that was used in Carrara, Italy for centuries.
Ah, yes.
It was called the lisatura method. Just picture the sheer terror of this process. You have a massive block of marble sitting on a steep, treacherous, slippery slope. The workers would construct a sledge made of thick wooden beams called a lisa. They would wedge the block onto the sledge.
And then slide it down.
Yes. Their job was to slide this 50-ton monster down a 45-degree mountain path. Their only braking system consisted of hemp ropes wrapped around wooden stakes driven into the rock further up the mountain. It seems like marble obeys gravity without mercy. How did we survive moving it?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the blunt reality of historical extraction is that the material was baptized in human blood.
Wow.
The physical forces at play there are astounding. The friction of the ropes against the wooden stakes would generate so much heat they would often start smoking. The men guiding the sledge, the lisatori, had to constantly monitor the tension.
Because if they mess up, everyone dies.
Exactly. If the sledge moved too fast, it gained unstoppable momentum. If a wooden stake snapped under the tension, or if a single hemp rope frayed and broke, the sledge would immediately break free. And a 50-ton block of stone tumbling down a mountain slope. There's no running away from that. It crushes everyone in its path.
It's terrifying. It required an endless supply of expendable labor, often enslaved people, prisoners of war, or desperately poor local quarrymen who just absorbed the physical trauma of moving these mountains piece by piece.
That was the human cost of those ancient monuments.
But surely that was just the ancient world, right? Fast forward to the modern era. We don't use wet wood and hemp ropes anymore. We have industrial technologies. So how does the modern quarry work?
The process is infinitely more efficient today, but it is no less violent to the landscape. Today, we essentially terraform the mountains. We carve them into massive, stepped geometric terraces. And instead of iron chisels, the modern industry relies heavily on diamond wire saws.
Wait, how do you cut a mountain with a wire? That sounds like trying to slice a brick with a piece of dental floss.
It is a fascinating piece of engineering. It isn't a solid blade. It is a thick, continuous steel cable that is threaded with small cylindrical beads. These beads are encrusted with industrial-grade synthetic diamonds.
Oh, I see.
A massive motor drives this wire in a continuous loop at incredibly high speeds, pulling it tightly through the stone. But it isn't actually slicing the stone the way a knife slices bread. It is an abrasive process.
So it's grinding it.
Yes. The diamonds are harder than the calcite crystals in the marble, so as the wire rapidly skins, the diamonds literally grind a microscopic path through the stone, slowly eating their way through the block through sheer high-speed friction.
That is wild. And they use these alongside massive channeling machines, hydraulic drills, computer-guided CNC cutters, and front-end loaders with tires taller than a person. The sheer scale of the machinery required just to interact with the stone is massive.
And that fundamental issue of scale is exactly why the human cost remains deeply troubling, even today. Whether you are using a wooden sledge in ancient Rome or a modern hydraulic crane, you cannot negotiate with the weight of the stone.
Gravity always wins.
Exactly. A snapped steel cable acts like a whip that can cut a person in half. A shifting block, a sudden fracture in the rock face, or a vehicle rollover on those steep terrace roads. These are not minor workplace accidents, they are fatal, catastrophic events.
And the physical danger isn't just the sudden cinematic accidents, it's the slow, creeping violence of the environment, too. The research highlights the intense physical toll on the quarry workers' bodies. It's a life of crushed fingers, severe spinal and joint degradation from the constant vibration of heavy tools.
And profound, irreversible hearing loss from the deafening echo of machinery inside a stone canyon. But perhaps the most insidious long-term danger in a quarry or a stone-cutting facility isn't the weight of the stone, it's the dust. When you grind through marble with a diamond wire saw, or when you polish it in a fabrication shop, you're throwing microscopic particles of stone and silica into the air.
And inhaling that rock dust day after day, your lungs aren't designed to process stone.
Exactly. When you inhale fine silica dust, those microscopic, jagged, crystalline particles lodge deep into the tiny air sacs of your lungs. Your immune system tries to attack the particles, which creates chronic inflammation and eventually leads to massive scar tissue forming inside the lung.
Which is silicosis, right?
Yes, this is a disease called silicosis. The lungs literally stiffen, losing their ability to extract oxygen. It is progressive, incurable, and suffocating. The modern stone industry has had to implement incredibly strict silica awareness protocols, constant water suppression during cutting, and heavy respiratory gear just to try and mitigate this slow-motion hazard.
It changes how you look at the stone entirely. The research spends a significant amount of time exploring the cultural impact of this danger, specifically focusing on Carrara, Italy. This is a region where the marble industry isn't just an economic driver. I mean, it is their ancestral identity.
It's the stone of Michelangelo.
Exactly, it's in their blood. But because the working conditions in these quarries were so historically brutal, so unforgiving, Carrara actually evolved into a hotbed for radical labor politics.
Yes, the socio-political history of Carrara is fascinating. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the quarrymen, the haulers, and the stone carvers were central to aggressive anarchist and radical labor movements in Italy.
Which makes total sense when you think about it.
The political climate of the entire region was forged by the stark, inescapable contrast between the incredibly wealthy merchants and aristocrats who sold and bought the pristine stone, and the desperate workers who were constantly being maimed and killed to extract it. The stone bred radicalism because the exploitation was so visible.
And that exploitation is not purely historical. This is where we need to address a very serious aspect of the global supply chain detailed in the source material. When you look at the modern, interconnected global market, there is a stark contrast between the absolute luxury of the final polished product in a showroom and the reality of its extraction in certain parts of the world.
It's a very difficult reality to confront.
And I want to be extremely clear here for the listeners. We are not taking any political sides on this issue. We are simply impartially reporting the facts that are documented directly in the reports from the U.S. Department of Labor and the International Labor Organization, or ILO, which are included in our source material.
Right, and the data presented in those reports is sobering. The ILO has documented that more than 1 million children are actively involved in child labor in mines and quarries worldwide.
Over 1 million. That's staggering.
Furthermore, investigations by the U.S. Department of Labor have highlighted forced child labor in stone quarrying in specific regions, pointing to ILO-linked estimates that up to 500,000 stone quarry workers in places like Tamil Nadu, India, were operating under conditions of bonded labor.
Again, just to reiterate, we are simply reporting the findings from these government and international agencies. But it really highlights what a complex, opaque global web this is.
Absolutely.
The research notes that this absolutely does not mean every single piece of marble or natural stone on the market is tainted by forced labor. There are heavily regulated, ethical quarries operating all over the world. But it highlights the uncomfortable reality that global supply chains, with their countless middlemen, brokers, and repackagers, can easily launder the origin of a stone.
Exploitation can be hidden unless buyers demand absolute traceability. And the finished product is practically designed to enforce a cognitive disconnect. When consumer looks at a perfectly smooth, cool, flawless surface in a high-end showroom, the beauty of the stone actively hides the violence of its origin.
There is a line in the research that just hits like a punch to the gut. It says, "A polished hotel lobby can begin as someone else's back pain." That is the fundamental truth of luxury that nobody wants to think about when they are admiring the architecture.
Which naturally introduces a profound friction into the story. If extracting this material is this statistically dangerous, this insanely expensive, requires moving literal mountains, and relies on so much human suffering and heavy machinery, why do it?
Yeah, why not use something else?
Why go to all this extraordinary trouble? Why not just build with wood or fire some clay bricks or use a soft local stone that is sitting right on the surface?
That is the million-dollar question, and the answer is that marble has almost never been used purely as a practical building material. Nobody builds a barn out of marble. It was an instrument of power. It was how empires mapped their authority in 3 dimensions.
Marble is architectural rhetoric. It communicates something very specific to anyone who looks at it. Let's look at how different ancient civilizations leveraged this stone.
Like the Greeks, right?
Yes. The ancient Greeks, for instance, were philosophically obsessed with capturing ideal proportions, mathematical harmony, and civic identity. They relied heavily on highly specific local white marbles, like the blindingly bright, pristine stone from the island of Paros or from Mount Penteli near Athens.
And they built the Parthenon out of that.
Exactly. They used this stone to build their civic temples and to carve statues of their gods, attempting to capture a sense of divine perfection in the physical world.
But the Romans look at that Greek model of local civic pride and say, that's cute, but we're going to take this concept and industrialize it. The Romans didn't just want local white stone from their own backyard. They actively, aggressively imported colored marbles from every single corner of their conquered territories.
The logistics of the Roman marble trade are mind-boggling even today. They established a massive imperial supply chain specifically to move heavy stones across the Mediterranean without combustion engines.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I love thinking about Roman architecture this way. It completely changes how you experience ancient ruins. The Roman use of imported marble was essentially a giant 3D billboard for their military dominance and logistical supremacy.
The billboard is a perfect analogy.
They weren't just building a temple or a public bathhouse to look pretty. Imagine walking through the Roman Forum at the height of the empire. You wouldn't just see white stone. You would see brilliant Numidian yellow marble imported from North Africa.
And deep, blood-red porphyry dragged out of the remote mountains of Egypt.
Right? You'd see vibrant green marbles from Greece and striking purple and white stones from Asia Minor. They weren't just building a temple.
Every color was a geographical tag.
Yes. They were putting these foreign stones on public display right on the street corner and literally saying to the average Roman citizen, look at these rocks. You will never travel to Egypt. You will never see the deserts of Africa. But our legions conquered them. We own those mountains.
We brought them to you.
Exactly. We control the seas and the trade routes, and we are so unfathomably powerful that we brought their mountains here to hold up the roof while you take a bath. It is an ultimate flex.
It is architectural theater. It is a deliberate visual display of subjugation. By physically embedding those foreign stones into the civic architecture of Rome, they were proving that the empire could conquer distance, geography, and nature itself.
And we see this specific legacy of projecting power through stone echoed everywhere in human history. Look at Mughal India. When Emperor Shah Jahan lost his favorite wife, he didn't just build a nice memorial.
He built the Taj Mahal.
Right. He used the incredibly pristine, pure, white Makrana marble from Rajasthan to build it. He took unimaginable, overwhelming imperial grief and solidified it into eternal, luminous architecture.
Or look at Renaissance Italy. The papacy and the fiercely competitive, wealthy, elite families of Florence and Rome didn't use Carrara marble just because it looked nice. They used it to project their religious piety, their sophisticated humanist taste, and their immense concentrated wealth.
It was always about showing off.
Exactly. When Michelangelo carves the statue of David, it isn't merely a masterpiece of human anatomy. It was a massive, incredibly expensive political statement of Florentine power, warning their rivals, carved into an impossibly large, flawless block of Carrara stone.
This perfectly aligns with a brilliant concept from the research notes. The author describes marble as acting like stored prestige. It's a fascinating economic idea. Marble isn't like gold or silver. You can't mint it into coins. You couldn't use a chunk of marble to buy a loaf of bread in the marketplace.
No, it lacked liquidity. But it served a much more important function for the ruling class. It converted raw financial wealth into legitimacy. And that psychological trick, using heavy ancient stone to project stability and authority, is something we still fall for today.
We absolutely do.
Think about the modern institutions that deliberately rely on this exact material language. Why do we put massive marble columns and polished stone floors in central banks, supreme courthouses, state capitals, and national museums?
Because it makes them feel completely untouchable.
Exactly. When you walk into a major financial institution and your footsteps echo off a polished marble floor and the teller is sitting behind a massive slab of stone, the architecture is actively speaking to your subconscious.
It's sending a message.
It is saying, you can trust us with your life savings. We are completely stable. Look at our walls. We are older, calmer, and infinitely more permanent than we actually are. We aren't going anywhere. It manufactures a false sense of eternal security.
It is a material language of absolute power. And there is a tragic irony highlighted in the research that I can't stop thinking about. Historically, the people who actually made the stone beautiful, the impoverished quarrymen who risked their lives to cut it out of the earth, they never owned it.
No, they didn't.
The enslaved laborers who destroyed their bodies, dragging it across continents, the brilliant but low-status artisans who inhaled the dust to carve it, they were rarely the ones who actually owned the buildings. The people who bled into the marble almost never got to walk proudly through the front doors of the temples or the palaces they built.
It is one of the most enduring, recurring themes in human history. The laborers and the builders are swallowed by time and forgotten, while the wealthy patrons and the emperors are immortalized by the stone.
And speaking of immortalization, there is a weird friction here. We have just spent all this time talking about how the Romans and the Greeks used this stone to build massive, intimidating, cold monuments of state power. But simultaneously, a sculptor in a dusty workshop is using the exact same rock to carve the delicate folds of a woman's dress.
Or to mimic the soft warmth of human skin.
Right. How does one single material do both? Why use a cold mountain to carve intimate human bodies?
The answer lies in the unique physical properties of the stone itself. Scientifically, marble is uniquely suited for figurative sculpture. We talked earlier about how incredibly dense and crystalline it is, which allows it to take a mirror polish. But paradoxically, despite that density, it is actually quite soft compared to other stones.
Really, it doesn't seem soft.
Geologists use the Mohs hardness scale to measure a mineral's resistance to scratching. A diamond is a 10, talc is a 1. Marble sits right around a 3.
Which means it is significantly softer than something like granite.
Much softer. Granite usually sits around a 6 or a 7. Granite is incredibly brittle and difficult to carve with fine, expressive detail. Using hand tools, it tends to chip and shatter.
Okay, that makes sense.
But a Mohs hardness of 3 means that a highly skilled sculptor can use an iron chisel to confidently carve the impossibly delicate curve of an eyelid, the pulsing tension of a vein under the skin, or the deep, complex folds of a tunic without the stone crumbling or snapping off. It holds fine detail beautifully.
But it's not just about the carving, is it? It's about what happens when the carving is finished and you put the statue in the sunlight. The research explains a jaw-dropping optical property of fine, white marble. It allows for partial light penetration. It is actually translucent.
This is the absolute key to why marble feels so lifelike. We call it subsurface scattering. When a beam of light hits a piece of solid metal or even a piece of dark, dense granite, the light hits the flat, opaque surface and bounces right off. It looks flat.
Yeah.
But when light hits a piece of fine, pure white marble, it doesn't just bounce off the top layer. The photons actually penetrate a few millimeters deep into that interlocking calcite crystal lattice. The light scatters around inside the stone, bouncing off the internal crystals, and then reflects back out to your eye.
And here is the kicker. That specific optical effect, subsurface scattering, is exactly how human skin interacts with light. When light hits your hand, it penetrates the top layer of your epidermis, scatters around in your skin, and bounces back out.
It creates an eerie, unmistakable lifelikeness. It is dead, ancient matter made to look physically warm and alive. This optical illusion is what drove Michelangelo's famous, almost mystical philosophy of sculpture.
That the figure is already inside the stone.
Exactly. He believed that the perfect idealized figure was already trapped inside the solid block of stone. He felt his job as the sculptor wasn't to create a body from scratch, but simply to chip away the excess rock and release the life that was already hiding inside. Whether he meant that literally or just poetically, it perfectly captures the idea that marble holds a hidden potential for flex.
Okay, but I have to stop you here because this is the moment in the research where a massive bomb is dropped on our historical imagination. We are talking about the warmth of the stone, the translucence, the pure white antiquity of Greek and Roman art.
The classical ideal.
Exactly. We all picture the ancient world filled with these pristine, austere, blindingly white marble statues projecting noble calm. But that entire image is a lie, isn't it? The research explicitly states that these statues were painted.
This raises an important question. How much of our association with marble's purity is based on a historical accident? Because yes, it is one of the most fascinating examples of how history gets rewritten by an accident.
Couldn't believe it when I read it.
According to extensive research, including work heavily publicized by the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the vast majority of ancient Roman and Greek marble statues were not left as bare stone. They were vividly, intensely painted and completely gilded.
So they didn't look like elegant minimalist art pieces. They looked like brightly colored action figures.
Exactly. They painted the skin tones, they painted the hair bright yellow or black, they painted the eyes with striking pupils, they painted the lips red, and they covered the clothing in complex, colorful, geometric patterns.
That is just wild to visualize.
Sometimes the marble was completely covered in thick pigment. If an ancient Greek citizen time-traveled to a modern museum and saw a room full of bare, white marble statues, they wouldn't think it looked elegant. They would think the statues were unfinished and ghostly.
This blows my mind. So how did we get so obsessed with the idea of pure white classical art?
Time and weather. Over hundreds and thousands of years, as these statues were abandoned to the elements or buried underground, the natural paints, the organic binders, and the pigments simply decayed, dissolved, and washed away.
So they basically got power washed by time.
Pretty much. By the time the artists of the Renaissance, people like Michelangelo and Donatello, started digging these ancient statues out of the Roman ruins, all the paint was completely gone. They were digging up bare, white stone.
Oh my God. The Renaissance artists looked at these weathered statues and thought, wow, the ancients had such incredible restraint. They loved pure, unpainted white marble.
And they copied it.
And so the Renaissance masters began intentionally carving their own bare, unpainted white statues to mimic a classical style that literally never existed. We built an entire centuries-long aesthetic philosophy of Western art around faded paint.
It reveals how much of our relationship with this material is projected psychology. The psychology of marble is incredibly deep, and it triggers very specific, almost primal human responses.
The author of the research breaks this psychological profile down beautifully. First, they point out the human desire for permanence. We are deeply aware that we are mortal. We know our bodies will decay, so we crave surrounding ourselves with things that violently resist decay.
We want to last forever.
Exactly. Second, there's our desperate need to remember. We have always used marble for tombs, headstones, and war memorials because we want to believe that our memory, our legacy, can somehow outlast the fragility of human flesh.
And third, there's an obsession with idealization. When you look at a classical marble statue, you're not looking at an ordinary, messy human body. You are looking at a heavily edited version of humanity.
Right, they never look like real people.
The marble bodies don't sweat, they don't have wrinkles, they don't get sick, and they don't age. They represent a frozen, perfected state of being that we can never actually achieve in real life. We use the stone to construct a fantasy of ourselves.
The research proposes a really fascinating thought experiment to explore this. They suggest trying to imagine the psychological energy of marble. If marble were a human being, who would it be? What kind of personality would it have?
And what do they say?
They conclude it would be the architect, the meticulous preservationist, or the fiercely grieving lover holding on to a memory. It's an energy that desperately, obsessively wants order, continuity, and an eternal legacy.
But the flip side of that personality profile is a profound emotional distance. A marble personality might polish its emotions into a state of total composure, actively hiding any real suffering, messiness, or vulnerability beneath a flawless veneer of elegance. It is undeniably beautiful, but it can be incredibly stubbornly cold.
Which perfectly sets up our final chapter today, because we have spent the last hour talking about ancient emperors, grieving kings, and Renaissance masters. But let's bring this into the 2030s.
Right, modern day.
We aren't exactly building full-scale, solid marble temples to the gods anymore. The era of building the Parthenon is over. So how does this ancient, heavy psychology of stored prestige translate into modern consumer behavior?
The scale of the architecture has shrunk, but the underlying human desire hasn't changed one bit. We no longer build temples, we build kitchen islands and primary bathrooms. The modern global marble market is massive. It was estimated at $73 billion globally in 2025. And that demand is driven almost entirely by luxury residential construction, high-end hotel lobbies, and upscale domestic renovations.
But here is the absolute wildest, most counterintuitive part of this entire deep dive for me. We just spent all this time establishing that marble is the ultimate symbol of permanence, right? It survived the tectonic oven, it survived the Romans, but chemically speaking, if you put it in a modern home, it is incredibly fragile.
It is highly vulnerable to the modern environment, and this goes back to the very beginning of our conversation. Because marble is fundamentally calcium carbonate, it reacts violently with even the mildest acids.
Wait, explain how that works. Why does a slice of lemon ruin a piece of a mountain?
It is a microscopic chemical attack. The fundamental structure of marble is calcium bonded with carbon and oxygen. When it comes into contact with an acid which contains highly reactive hydrogen ions, the acid literally attacks the calcium carbonate.
It breaks it apart.
Yes. It breaks the molecular bonds, tearing the stone apart to form calcium ions, water, and carbon dioxide gas.
Yeah.
The stone doesn't just stain. The acid physically dissolves the top layer of the stone, turning solid rock into liquid and gas that float away.
That is insane. It's literally melting.
It is why acid rain is such a devastating problem for historical architecture. Over decades, the mild acidity in polluted rain slowly melts outdoor statues and gargoyles, turning crisp, beautifully carved faces into soft, blurry lumps.
Oh, man.
And indoors, it is even worse. Everyday household acids, lemon juice, a splash of vinegar, tomato sauce, a stilled glass of wine will etch, scratch, and dull a polished marble countertop almost immediately upon contact.
This leads to my absolute favorite analogy for modern interior design. Putting a pristine, blindingly white, porous marble countertop in a busy, chaotic kitchen where you are slicing lemons, spilling wine, and dropping heavy cast iron pans is a terrible, terrible practical choice.
It's a nightmare to maintain.
It makes absolutely no logical sense. It is the equivalent of buying a vintage, open-top sports car and choosing to drive it through a massive snowstorm. You do not buy it for utility.
Not at all. If you wanted pure utility, you would buy a stainless steel prep table. If you wanted durability, you would buy granite or engineered quartz or the highly advanced sintered stones that are dominating the market now, which are practically impervious to stains and acids.
You don't buy the marble to chop onions on, you buy it for the emotion. It is the ultimate modern status symbol. The research accurately labels it a domestic monument.
That's a great term for it.
When you pay $20,000 to put a massive slab of imported Italian Calicut marble right in the middle of your kitchen island, you are signaling to every single person who walks into your house that you have arrived.
You're making a statement.
You are loudly declaring that you have enough disposable wealth and enough sophisticated taste to install a literal fragile piece of a foreign mountain inside your house, even if it requires constant paranoid maintenance to keep it looking perfect.
It is the exact same psychological mechanism as the Roman emperor importing Egyptian stone. It is just scaled down for the suburbs. We are still using this stone to map our personal empires. But this unrelenting modern demand comes with an immense compounding environmental toll.
Because of the extraction.
Because we are now extracting marble at an industrial scale that history has never seen before.
We talked earlier about terraforming mountains, but the destruction isn't just about the massive blocks of rock we take away. It's about the staggering amount of waste we leave behind in the ecosystem.
The modern extraction and fabrication process requires massive, continuous amounts of water. You have to constantly cool the high-speed diamond wire saws and suppress the dangerous silica dust we discussed earlier.
Right, the silicosis prevention.
This mixture of water and microscopic stone dust creates a massive byproduct called marble slurry. It is a fine, thick, milky sludge. And disposing of this slurry is a catastrophic environmental challenge for the industry.
Where does it go?
If it isn't strictly managed and filtered, it washes down the mountainsides, completely contaminating local water systems. It coats the bottom of rivers, chokes aquatic plant life, and suffocates local ecosystems.
So what does the future look like? Because the research makes it clear that humanity isn't just going to suddenly abandon our love affair with marble. We are too deeply obsessed with it. But we are facing serious competition from modern technology.
We really are.
We have all these high-tech substitutes now, engineered quartz, large format porcelain slabs, and sintered stone, which the research notes are growing heavily in market share as we move through the 2030s.
The industry is facing a reckoning, and it is having to adapt rapidly. The future of natural stone lies entirely in accountability and transparency. Modern consumers, especially younger demographics, are increasingly demanding proof that their luxury isn't built on exploitation.
They want to see the receipts.
They want strict chain of custody documentation. They want third-party ethical sourcing audits to prove there is no forced labor. They want environmental product declarations, EPDs, to measure the exact carbon footprint of pulling the stone out of the ground.
The research argues a really compelling point here.
Yeah.
If you want to use natural stone responsibly, the greenest marble is actually local marble. Instead of shipping a heavy block of stone from a mountain in Italy, putting it on a massive diesel-burning cargo ship, and sailing it across the ocean to California, use the stone that is beneath your feet.
Or better yet, use reclaimed, recycled slabs from demolished buildings.
Exactly. The industry has to fundamentally balance our deep, ancient human desire for heritage, beauty, and connection to the earth with the harsh reality of ecological restraint. We cannot keep hollowing out mountains without consequence.
Which brings us beautifully back to that Kelly subpersonality we mentioned at the very beginning of the deep dive. The perspective grounded entirely in empathy, nature, and environmental care.
Yeah, bringing it full circle.
It forces us to look at a polished kitchen counter and ask a deeply uncomfortable philosophical question. Can beauty truly remain beautiful if you know it depends on invisible human suffering? Can a stone represent peace if it requires the complete irreversible destruction of a living mountain to get it into your home.
That is the defining existential question for the future of the marble industry. How do we find a way to admire the majesty of the stone while taking full moral responsibility for the land it came from and the human hands that bled to bring it to us?
It really is.
So what does this all mean? We have traced this rock on an impossible journey. From a microscopic, fragile shell floating in an ancient warm ocean through the crushing 300 million-year fires of the Earth's tectonic crust. We followed it down the terrifying, deadly slopes of a quarry, watched it map the conquests of emperors, and finally tracked it into the polished, heavily air-conditioned luxury homes of the modern world.
It's an incredible story.
Ultimately, our relationship with marble is a desperate attempt to negotiate with time. We are fragile, temporary, messy creatures, and we use this dense, heavy, beautiful rock to resist our own impermanence. We want to leave a mark that says we were here.
We just want to be remembered.
Yet the stone itself is born of violent transformation, and for thousands of years, bringing it into the light has required immense human sacrifice and environmental destruction. It is the ultimate paradox of beauty and brutality.
And as we consider the future of how we build and what legacy we're choosing to leave behind, there is a fascinating, almost tragic irony to consider. As we have discussed extensively, despite its weight, marble is chemically vulnerable. It is susceptible to acid, to weather, and to the slow grind of time.
Very true.
Meanwhile, today, for the sake of sheer utility, stain resistance, and convenience, we are increasingly replacing our natural marble with highly engineered plastics, durable resins, sintered synthetics, and quartz bound by artificial polymers.
Materials that, on a chemical level, are practically indestructible. They don't dissolve in acid rain.
Exactly. So think about this final image. Our ancient ancestors left us their highest civic ideals, their gods, their heroes, and their grief, carved in marble, a natural stone that, over millennia, slowly dissolves, weathers, and returns to the earth. But today, we are surrounding ourselves with synthetic countertops and plastic-bound kitchen islands. Thousands of years from now, when future archaeologists dig up the ruins of our modern civilization, the beautiful marble statues in the temples will have melted away in the acid rain. But our synthetic, plastic resin counters will emerge from the dirt looking absolutely brand new. What will that say to them about what we truly valued and what we deliberately chose to make eternal?
Wow. Are we leaving behind monuments to our highest ideals, or just indestructible monuments to our own convenience? That is a thought that is going to sit with me for a long time. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope that the next time you walk through a hushed bank lobby or you were slicing a lemon on a polished stone counter, you will look a little closer at the veins running through the rock. We hope you remember the deep time, the tectonic pressure, and the human hands it took to bring it to you. Until next time.